are just thrilled that you're here today. Obviously, this is our first day in our brand new facility, and if you've been here ever before, you know that a lot of work has gone into this. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you've come by at some point, maybe you've been driving by and you've just been seeing the changes from the outside. But we are thrilled that you're here today. We hope that this feels like home for you, no matter if this is your first time in church ever or you've been in church every day of your life. We want you to feel welcome here, and we're just thrilled that you would join us today. I gotta real quick before we get going too much is just acknowledge the work and the hours that have gone into this place, and there are dozens of people in our church who have spent hours here just building and cleaning and hanging drywall and doing all kinds of crazy things. And if I had the Photoshop skills, I would have put together a Mount Rushmore of probably the four horsemen, right? The ones who have really done probably more than anybody. They've been here. I mean, this was their full-time job for a while. And I just have to acknowledge Adam West, who, if you know Adam, he has spent countless hours here. Phil Miller, who was here at the first service, who has literally been crawling through the ceiling the last few days and hanging, putting electrical in and doing all kinds of things and just giving it all for that. And of course, we wouldn't have made it without Edgar, who's been here and just doing all kinds of things. And then probably the fourth one, he's a staff guy, but Joel has, he's a half-time staff guy who has spent probably 2 full-time jobs here over the last 3 months. And so just all of them, a phenomenal job, and we're just thrilled to be here. It's an exciting day for us as a church, and really for us, it is the beginning of chapter 2 of our story. We have been 4.5 years in an elementary school, setting up church every Sunday and coming in with the trailer and setting it all up and tearing it back down. And it will be something like most of us aren't going to know what to do when this service is over. And we just lock a door and walk out. That's just going to be weird. But so if we start just taking things outside, stop us, because that's not the goal today, all right? So, hey, thanks again for being here. We teach through series here in Story Church, and today we start a brand new series called Renovate, considering that's what we've been doing all summer long, is we've been renovating this facility, and so you might see stuff around the stage. We didn't just forget to clean up. That's kind of part of the thing this morning. We want you to understand that you're in the middle of a renovation project. And you're here. We want you to kind of feel that and experience that, because what we're going to talk about over the next few weeks is really what would it look like for us to begin to renovate the parts of our life that need to be upgraded, right? There's certain things going on in every one of our lives where there's certain areas that we're saying, you know what? That's probably a wall that needs to come down. That's probably a fixture that needs to be changed. For some of us, what happens, and you probably know this, when you first moved into the home that you live in now, you saw stuff, right? Like you saw something in the corner that didn't look right. You saw some mold over there. You saw a light that was out. And you saw, different things, and you're going, man, we got to change that. But what happened? You lived there 6 months and you don't see that stuff anymore, right? Like you forgot it exists. And other people come to visit your house and they're like, whoa, what's growing in the corner? But you don't see it anymore. Like you forgot what it is. And so really what this series is about is sort of opening our eyes a little bit to our lives and to going, okay, what are the parts of my life that need to be renovated? What in my life needs to begin to start to have work done to it? And so we're going to walk through that over these next few weeks, and we're going to talk together about our finances, our marriages. We're just going to try and get into every area of our lives and just try and figure out what is it that God would have for us. But I wanted to start this morning by talking about really it's sort of pre-renovation, and that is a foundation. Because the truth is no matter what you do to your home that you're living in, whether you change out the counters and every fixture and new appliances and all that stuff, if your foundation is cracked or it's leaning or there's something wrong with it, like it doesn't matter how much money and shine you put into that place, it's not good, right? Like it's going to go down at some point and it's not going to last. And so we don't want to get into the hard work of saying, well, let's just add this to my life or let's change that. And if there are foundation issues that we need to deal with first. And the best example I have of this is really not a building situation. It's last week we came over here after our last Sunday at Spring Valley, and we did a tailgate party here. We were doing a football series, and we finished that out, And we decided to play some football up front, which sounded like a good idea at the time, until you realized that the grass was long and the holes were deep. And so those were kind of camouflaged, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I was playing some lockdown defense on Seth Choi, and there was a pass, and there's a little bit of controversy of what happened, whether I was shoved or not touched at all. It just depends on who you ask. And so I was running, and I stepped in a hole, and my ankle just popped. Like I heard it pop in like two places, and I went down in a heap. And so, the medical staff came flying out. Like, we don't have a medical staff. But they grabbed me and they brought me inside and they're putting ice on my ankle. And I could not walk. I couldn't move. By the time, they sort of helped me get to my car, I drove home. My foot is pounding and throbbing all the way home. I get home, I can't get out of the car. My wife has to help me out, help me into the house. I couldn't get up the stairs. I couldn't do anything for myself. I just couldn't move. And over the last week, thank God, so many people have been praying because there was so much to do here still. They were worried they would have to do it, right? So they prayed for me, and my ankle got better. Like, literally, I am blown away. I thought I was on crutches for the next several months. I thought I broke it. And I'm telling you, I barely limping today. Like, it's been miraculous in my mind. But here's what I learned in that, is that if you don't have a solid foundation on your body, physically, if your legs aren't good, if your feet aren't good, if you got a toe that's stubbed, everything else is affected. You can't move around the way that you want to do it. You can't, just simple things, right? Like going up the stairs, getting into the home. Those became major, major challenges. And so what I want to talk about today is just how important it is to have a solid foundation before we really get into talking about changing stuff and having renovations and all the fun things that happen. And really I want to talk about that because here's the truth, and here's the thing that I want you to understand about all of this, is that your future is only as firm as your foundation. Your future is only as firm as your foundation. And as we're talking through this series, as we're going through these different areas, I don't want us to lose sight of that. I don't want us to get into thinking, well, I can just go on another trip with my wife and that'll fix my marriage. No, let's get to the renovation, or to the foundation part of that. Before we get into renovation, let's talk about foundation. Let's go in and talk about, okay, what is it? Is there an issue at the base here that I need to get to the bottom of and I need to begin to deal with? Now, Jesus was, teaching about this one day. And the truth is Jesus had a lot of knowledge in this particular area. You may or may not know that Jesus' father, Joseph, was known to be a carpenter. Now, as the custom would have been, is that as Jesus is growing up in this home, he would have been learning his father's trade. He would have been in the home, kind of doing all the things with dad and assisting him. And, as at different times in my life, I've built things, and my kids love to just be there and hand me tools. Can I hand you stuff? Sure. So they come out and they'll hand me things as I'm building. Now you can imagine Joseph's frustration when he turns his back and he turns back around and Jesus has built like a china cabinet, right? And it's beautiful and it's perfect. And he's like, dang it, every time he does it better than me, and so Joseph is probably trying to teach Jesus, but Jesus has got Jesusness, right? And so it's all going really well and all of this, but Jesus is constantly around this sort of construction, building, this kind of stuff. And so when Jesus begins teaching at one point and he uses a building analogy, you need to understand, Jesus is talking from experience. He's pulling from his own life, from something he understands. And this is what we're going to jump in here today. So here's the deal. I would have loved to have Jesus here over the last few months, physically with a hammer. He would have done a lot better job than me and others. But we're going to learn from him and his skill here as he teaches. And so in Matthew chapter 7, here's what Jesus says. He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Now, Jesus is saying, listen, it is so important that you build your life on a solid foundation. That you don't just jump into things and you go, you think you're going to go this direction without really checking, like, is this thing solid? Is this firm? Now, we have had a great benefit here as a church that despite all the work we've done and some of the stuff we've changed and we've knocked out walls here and we've added things and we've done stuff, the one thing we didn't really have to touch was the foundation. The foundation was good. We were able to build on the foundation, and that's not just a physical truth, that's a spiritual truth. And one of the cool things, one of the coolest parts of this story, the fact that we're here in this building, I love the fact that as a church, we are standing on the shoulders of another church that went before us. And you may or may not know the story, but there is a church that has been in Durham for over 100 years, Fuller Memorial Church, and they have been in different locations throughout the city, but for the last 30, 40 years, they were right here in this building. And when it came time for them to close and to just kind of move on, they approached us and we were able to work it out to where we were able to take over this facility and begin to kind of put our stamp on it. But what I love is that here we are, a 4-year-old church, and yet we're barely, I have a 4-year-old at home, okay? Now, I mean, he still needs us to do stuff, right? Like all the time, it's Mom, can you come, wipe me, or like what? It's like, okay, come on, kid, got to learn this, right? Like things like that, right? So, not to say that's us, but it kind of is us, right? Like, so we're 4. We're barely learning stuff. We're barely learning how to do church and barely learning how to function together. And yet here we, all of a sudden now, we get to tie our story in and stand on the shoulders of a church that's been here in the city faithfully serving for over 100 years. I mean, very few churches have that kind of history that they get to stand on, and yet we do. And I wanted to make sure I point out there are some of the Fuller people here today, and some of them are standing right over here, sitting right over here, and can we give them a hand and thank them? Yeah. I just think it's amazing in so many ways of not only what they did for so many years, but then even as their season is closing and the sunset was going down for them, with their sort of last moment, they said, let's pass this on, let's pass the baton, and I just think that is a beautiful thing that unfortunately does not happen very often in our country or anywhere in the world. Most often, things get sold off to a developer, and next thing you know, there's a neighborhood here. And instead, we get to experience life as a church here, and so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But here's the deal. Jesus says, therefore, the one who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man who builds his house on the rock, and when the storm comes, he's good. It doesn't go down. And here's the thing. This passage, what I just said, we started with therefore. Now, if you're picking up on this, maybe you're going, okay, well, what therefore? Like usually that's like what you say after you said other things, right? Like I said a bunch of stuff and then therefore, and then this is the conclusion. Now, I wish we had time of this morning, but what I want you to understand is there is some really important teaching right before what we are talking about this morning. And it's found in Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7. It's a really well-known, famous teaching that Jesus gives. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And really in this sermon, in this teaching that he gives, it's probably, if you wanted to learn what is this whole Jesus thing about, that's where you need to go read. Like anywhere else in the Bible is awesome, but go read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and you will know exactly what Jesus is all about. In those chapters, Jesus begins to describe to us, here's what it looks like to live in the kingdom of God, this new kingdom that Jesus is bringing onto earth. He says, when you follow me, here's how we live. We don't live like everyone else does. And that's not just like, hey, we don't cuss and we don't whatever. No, it's like we are generous. We are loving. We are compassionate. We are forgiving. We are grace-filled. And just over and over, Jesus begins to teach and describe, here's how we live in this sort of new way of living. And Jesus comes right into a culture of Rome that is all about force and power and control. And Jesus comes in and says, no, listen, it's the weak, it's the lower, it's the lessers. It's those who have not who ultimately have, and it's those who give away rather than take. And Jesus brings in this whole new way of living. And so he describes all of this and he just lays it out. Here's how we live. Here's how we live in the kingdom. And then he says, therefore, everyone who hears all of that and puts it into practice is like the wise man who builds his house on the rock. Now, I've got a couple of pictures that I want you to see because these sort of demonstrate, these are kind of what come into my mind. This is, I believe, Malibu, California. I'm from California, and in California, there are, near the beach, really, really expensive homes that often are built up on cliffs that overlook the ocean, which is really cool until this happens, right? And so I guess if you have a lot of money, you also have the ability to be not very smart. And so these people build really expensive homes on cliffs that what happens in California is because it's so dry, it rains like 2 days a year, and then so everything like burns. There's constantly fires in California, and so you just kind of learn to live with that. And there's fires all over the place. All the vegetation burns up, and then there's nothing to hold these hills together. And then when it does rain, even if it's a little rain, the hills just start falling apart. There's nothing there. And so the mud starts sliding, and next thing you know, entire houses are like going down the street. They're falling down these mountains, and they're just like crushed and they're done for. And so I picture this every time I see a story like that on the news. I mean, I feel bad for them, but at the same time, I'm like, have you not seen this news report before? Like, what did you think was going to happen to your house, like when you did this? But people do that, and they build these monster houses here, and they'll just slide and get crushed. But then there's this other house that I just thought this was brilliant, because here's a guy who found some real estate, right? I mean, he found a rock, and he's like, I'm building my house on that thing, and it doesn't matter what's around it. He just built this awesome house in the middle. He drives his boat out there, and it's like, I'm good. No matter what happens, I am solid, right? Like there is nothing moving me. I've got another picture here, I think from a different angle, but it's apparently a pretty well-known house. There are pictures all over Google on this. You just Google like house on rock, and I mean, it's amazing. And so, this is just a beautiful, when I hear Jesus say, build your house on the rock. Like this, I want this picture to stick in your heart, in your head. I want you to think about this, because it doesn't matter what's going on around this house. This house isn't moving, right? Like it's good, right? It is staying, and it's just a cool picture to think about that. But here's what Jesus says. The one who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the man who builds his house on a rock. Now that's the important part, right? Because we can hear it, but if we don't put it into practice, then we're not doing anything about it. And so, in this process of doing all this, I've probably been to Lowe's over 100 times. Like, it's just been crazy. Like, constantly, multiple times a day often, over there at Lowe's. And half the time I'm going in with that wide-eyed, like, I have no idea what I'm doing look, right? And I walk in there, and they're trained to recognize that look, and then they come at you, and they just say, can I help you? And you're like, yes. And you just describe, and then they start opening packages and showing you how things fit and how it all works, and and they draw it out for you sometimes. And, you're going to need this, or you could do it this way, or whatever. And so they spell it out for you, and it's awesome. But here's the deal. I have to take what I just heard from them, and then I have to go back and do it. Like, I have to be the one who then, okay, here we go, and I drill the hole, or I knock the thing down, or I put the paint on the wall, or whatever. Like, I have to put it into practice. If all I did was hear from Guy at Lowe's and come here and go, well, this is what he said, but I don't do anything about it, well, then nothing happens. Nothing changes. And so we have to hear the words that Jesus is saying and then put them into practice. Like all this talk about living generously and loving and showing grace and forgiving somebody, like that's the hard work. That's the actual renovating type stuff that we have to do in order to begin to become and to change into what God wants us to be. So here's the deal. Renovating isn't just about knowing more stuff. And one of the most frustrating things for me is when I see people who've been in church their whole lives and they know all the answers. Like they know the Bible. They can look up any book you want. Who's Hezekiah? And they'll tell you all of it, what years they reigned and where they, it's like, dude, that's great that you know that. But sometimes they're the meanest people on the planet, right? Like they're just like mean. they're rotten, and they're stingy, and they're just, all, and it's like, are you not, like, you're learning all this, or you're hearing all this, but are you changing? Like, is it becoming something? Like, are you putting that into practice? And so as we follow Jesus, really, what should happen is, it's fine if our knowledge grows, but if our knowledge grows at a rate that outpaces our actual practice, then we become something that we shouldn't be. We need to begin to grow and learn and put into practice the things that we already know. And so really, knowledge is not what you need this morning. Obedience is. Really what you need more than learning another Bible story or learning another thing, you need to begin to just put into practice, like practice generosity, practice patience, practice forgiving somebody. You have to actually start to do the things that God has called us to do. And so what we're going to do over the next several weeks is we're going to begin to look at these different areas of our life. We're going to look at our finances, we're going to look at our marriages, we're going to look at our relationships and our hopes and our dreams and our futures, and we're going to look at all that stuff. But what the question that I want to make sure we started with today is, what's the foundation? Like, do we have a solid base from which we can start to talk about all those other things? And Jesus says that solid base is learning from Him and putting it into practice. That's the solid foundation. So let me ask you this morning, how is your foundation? Like, how's it going? Like, do you have problems, right? If you ever watch those renovation shows, the house flipping shows, I love them. But the nightmare, like the death sentence of a flip, is you've got foundation issues. Right? It's some house that's all crooked or it's got a massive crack once they pull things off and they see and it's like suddenly the budget skyrockets, the timeline skyrockets. Like, this is a major issue. And if we go into our houses of our lives and we begin just pulling things off the wall and changing them and changing the paint and whatever, but we've got a foundation issue, we're not going to get very far. We're going to be in trouble. And so Jesus says, listen, let's start with the foundation. Let's take what we know and let's begin to put it into practice. And I'm looking forward to these next few weeks, but the question we'll keep coming back to is our foundation good? What's your marriage built on? Like, what is it built on? What is the thing that drives your marriage? How about your finances? What was that built on? Is there something underlying that? Are you handling what God has put in your hands in the way that He wants you to do it? What's your foundation? Are your future, your plans, your hopes, your dreams, what is that built on? Is it built on what Jesus says is going to work for your life? Or is it built on some kind of selfish ambition? See, the truth is Jesus is not only a carpenter in life, but He was the one who put it all together. He's the one who created and built it all. And so when He created the world and all of us and everything in it, He is the master carpenter who's saying, listen, here's the design and here's how it's supposed to work. And some of us take it and we go, no, I think I know how to use it in a different way. And He's saying, no, that just doesn't work that way. I've designed it to work this other way. And so really what we need to do is go, okay, what is it? What is it that I'm supposed to base this on, and how am I supposed to live? For some of you in this room today, maybe for you, as I'm talking, you're recognizing, man, I'm not sure what my life is built on, or I'm not sure what my marriage is built on, my finances are built on, or my parenting is built on, and you're going, I'm just not sure where I'm going here. I'm not sure what's going on. For some of you, maybe you recognize, man, I know exactly what it's built on, and it's not good. And you're recognizing you've got some serious foundation issues. Here's what I want you to understand today. I want you to be filled with hope. I don't want you to be discouraged by that. I don't want you to go, man, I'm done. So I guess we tear it down. I want you to understand the God that I'm talking about, the Jesus that I've grown to know and love, He comes in and He fixes what's broken. He takes what's not good and He turns it into something amazing. Something awesome. And He's the one who's able to come in and level it and make it straight and make it solid and say, no, it's good. Let's start building from here. Let's fix what's broken and let's begin to move forward. And so I want you to know, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter what last night was or last week was, I want you to know and I want you to be filled with hope that God takes broken stuff and He puts it back together. He makes it whole. And so I hope you'll stick with us throughout the series as we go, because we're gonna tackle these different parts of our lives, and we're gonna begin to challenge some things and push some stuff. And for some of us, there's gonna be some walls that get knocked down, and we're gonna put in some new fixtures and some new floors in our life, and we're gonna make it look cool and make it feel cool, and we're gonna feel good about that. But man, let's address the foundation. And if you're in this room and you don't know Jesus, you don't have a relationship with him, I'm just telling you, you can keep building, but it's all going to come down at some point. When the storm hits, when the thing happens, when the phone call comes through, it's going to come crashing down. And I just got to tell you, I've watched people in my life who have a foundation on Christ, and cancer comes, financial ruin comes, they lose their job, family breaks apart, something happens, and I watch them, and they just go through it differently. They end up in those seasons, and the same bad stuff happens to them that happens to everybody, but there's something different about how they walk through it. And they walk through it with grace, and they walk through it with confidence and with faith that God is going to continue to hold them together, and God is going to help them through that season. And I'm telling you, if you don't have that foundation, if you aren't learning how to live the way that Jesus has caused us to live, then those seasons can crush you, and they can wipe you out completely. And so my challenge for you, my hope for you, if you don't know Jesus in this room today, why not? Why not invite him into your life? Why not give your life to him and begin to follow after him and learn from him and allow him to do what only he can do? The band's going to come. We're going to sing a couple more songs this morning. And I love the songs that we've picked today, and they speak to this. But here's what I want to do is I just want to pray for you. I want to give you an opportunity today. If you don't know Jesus, if you aren't sure what your foundation is, I want to invite you today in this moment. Why not begin to pour that foundation? Why not begin to say, listen, I'm ready for Jesus to begin to build in my life. Let's pray together. God, we love you. We thank you for all the ways that you've blessed us. Lord, I know that there are people in this room from every walk of life. Some, God, come in today feeling beat down. Some feel crushed. Some feel maybe they were hopeless walking in the door today. God, others are feeling great. Others, things are going well. But God, I know for every single one of us that the same truth is here, that we need the foundation that is you. We need to be built on you. And God, we hear words. Some of us have been in church our whole lives, and yet we're not really putting those things into practice. And so God, for us even, maybe we're 20-year veterans of this church thing, and yet God, in real life, we're sort of babies. We're barely learning. And so God, would you begin to teach us? Help us, God, as we lay the foundation that is you, as we begin to build on that. And if that's you today, I just want to challenge you in this moment, in the quietness of your heart and in your life, would you begin to speak to God? Maybe you've never done that before in your life and it scares you, but listen, he loves you. You don't have to be afraid to talk to him. He's been waiting for this moment for your whole life. Would you speak to him? Would you invite him in? Would you invite him to be the foundation upon everything else in your life is built? Just take a minute and talk to him. Let him know how messed up you feel. Let him know how broken you feel, and invite him to come in and to fix that, to begin to make it new. God, I'm confident that you love us, that you know the ins and outs of every single one of our lives. And despite my own ugliness and brokenness, God, that you love me and you love every person in this room. You've got a future and a hope and a plan for each one. God, may we leave this place filled with that hope, knowing that you're not done with us, no matter how far done we feel. And God, may you build in our lives something beautiful, even out of what's broken. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.